All right, and then so far in this unit, we've looked at different ways to solve problems. We looked at inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. And now we're going to look at some other things called conditional statements. And these statements are ways that we can look at some of the conjectures and postulates that we've done throughout the year. Okay, so first thing we'll talk about is what a conditional statement actually is. And a conditional statement is a statement that has two parts, the hypothesis and the conclusion. It's also known as an if-then statement. Okay, that's a conditional. If something happens, then something else happens. And we can also look at it in a symbolic way. You won't see this from us a whole lot, but I do want to point it out in case you see it at SATs, PSATs, those types of things. The P would be the hypothesis. I'm going to draw a little arrow there. So your hypothesis would be the P. The conclusion, I don't know what happened to the arrows there, would be the Q. And that's all that stands for. So just in case you see that in some of the things that we do throughout the year. Okay, so conditional is an if-then statement. So let's look at some examples of what an if-then statement actually is, that conditional statement. Okay, so if I wash my car, then it is clean. If I want to buy a drink from the soda machine, then I will need money. Those are conditional statements. Now, your hypothesis and conclusion. Okay, so your hypothesis is what we have in red, and the conclusion, whoops, let's get this spelled right. And the conclusion is what we have in blue. Notice we did not highlight the if and the then. Only what comes after it is the hypothesis and the conclusion. Okay, that's a big key. Okay, so the hypothesis is what comes after the if. Conclusion is what comes after the then. Do not include those two words in your hypothesis and conclusion. All right, so there are three different types of conditional statements that we'll look at. One is called the converse. And in the converse, the hypothesis and the conclusion are switched. Just switch the order. The if and the then stay in the same order. We just switch the order of what comes after it. Our symbolic translation. So notice we just flipped the P and the Q. That's it. It's still an if-then statement. We just switch that order up a little bit. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples of converse statements. So our original statement is, if I wash my car, then it is clean. The converse, I'm going to switch the order of my hypothesis and conclusion. So I'm going to take I wash my car. Instead of having it first, I'm going to put it last. And then I'm going to take my conclusion. Let me get a different color here. I'm going to take my conclusion and I'm going to put it first. And that's all that a converse is. Now notice you can change up the wording a little bit so that it makes more sense. So you could have just said, if it is clean, then I wash my car. That would have been just fine. But the way that we wrote this sentence makes a little bit more sense. If the car is clean, then I wash it. So you can kind of manipulate it a little bit as long as the meaning switches order. All right, this next one is called an inverse. So we've had a converse, which is switching the order. And an inverse, we change the hypothesis and conclusion by adding the word not to it or taking it out. And you have to add it to both. And I'll show you that here in an example. Oops, wrong way. All right, so an example of an inverse. Our original statement, if I'm going to work today, then I need to take my briefcase. Our inverse, notice we highlighted it here in green. If I'm not going to work today, then I do not need to take my briefcase. So that the big key right here is this word not. We've got to make sure that we add it or take it away from both. Okay, but we got to make sure we have that in there. And the final term that we'll look at in this video is called a contrapositive. And a contrapositive actually does both. Okay, a converse, we do the inverse of the statement and the converse. So it's kind of a combo deal. I'm switching the order and I'm putting the word not in there. Okay, so we're doing both. It's the converse of the inverse. You can kind of think of it that way as well. So let's look at an example. Our original, if I go to school, then I will eat lunch. So let's talk about what the inverse would look like. If I do not go to school, then I will not eat lunch. So that's our inverse. Same order, put the word not in there. And then our converse of the inverse, or our contrapositive, that's our key word there. So let me circle that for you. So that key word, our contrapositive, is that if I do not eat lunch, then I will not go to school. So we took that original, we made it an inverse, and switched it to get the contrapositive. All right, now that's as far as we're going to look at these right now. This will be enough to get you started on your assignment, looking at what a converse, inverse, contrapositive is, and we'll talk about how we can decide whether something's true or not in the next video.